welcome to Look for the Light, a podcast where we dive into the world of The Last of Us. I'm your host, Stuart Trainer, and I'm joined, as always, by someone who would probably take one look at Kansas City and turn the car around. It's Jess Sterling. Jess, how's it going?
You're already trying to get people against me, because if I say yes to that statement, all the people from Kansas City are going to hate me. But if I say no, maybe I can get Philadelphia. I'm making a sports reference. Do you know the Super Bowl, Stuart?
Oh, the Superb Owl, all of
The
that
Superb
stuff.
Owl.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
Philly
Taylor Swift
versus
and
Kansas
everything.
City.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philly won. Good for them. Go
I
Birds, I
mean,
guess.
well done in winning a national competition that your country believes is an international, worldwide event.
So stupid. This is not a sports podcast, in case you couldn't tell that
Should it
already.
be? I mean, we're so into sports.
I think it would have to be very specifically a sports podcast for people who do not respect sports or care about sports, because anybody who does would instantly be offended.
Maybe, yeah, what we could do is we could translate. Okay, one for after, but I think we've got a podcast idea here. I'm going to put it away, file it away. No, we're not here to talk about sports. We're here to talk about The Last of Us. Welcome to anyone new who is listening. If you like what you hear already, don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on your podcatcher. You can do it on the YouTube where you can find our lovely faces. Or you can go over to social media and harass us there at Look for the Light Pod. Or alternatively, you can email in your feedback, lookforthelightpodcast@gmail.com. Jess, this episode was a bit of a wild one, really, because it was a real kind of dramatic change from what we got last episode, right?
Right. So we go from just being tortured pretty much all episode, like our hearts like filling and breaking over and over and over again, to kind of back to the Joel and Ellie show with a splash of new character, Kathleen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm wondering, Stuart, because you were more of like a diehard fan when season 1 originally aired, I'm curious to know if there was major backlash against like the change from it being Pittsburgh in the video game to Kansas City on the show. From what I read, it was just because it was easier for them to find a production location that looked more
Yeah.
like Kansas City than Pittsburgh. And it's like, who really cares? Was it that Pittsburghian? I don't know. Were people like super upset besides probably some Pittsburgh residents?
If I remember rightly, there were some purists that were like, I don't see why they're changing it. Like, they have so much budget. They could just, do it in CG and all of those, typical complainers. But I think most people saw the practicality of, switching it up to Kansas as making sense. I think it also makes more sense narratively because, correct my geography here, but
Oh God, I
Kansas
hope
is a
not.
much further journey from where they've been than
Oh yeah,
Pittsburgh
Kansas
would
City,
be, right?
Missouri. So
Yeah,
Kansas City, Missouri is much further away than Pittsburgh.
yeah,
Because Pittsburgh is obviously in Pennsylvania. So they're moving more out west to go to Missouri.
yeah. So it's a great way of expediting the whole Joel and Ellie relationship. So because it explains they have been on the road for a long time and they've had to fill time with conversation. Like, what else were they going to do? As they kind of
Hmm.
illustrate with most of the show, it's a big thing of travel. So I think most people saw the practicality and the kind of location change. But of course, you're going to get some people that kind of have some dissensions. I think most of the dissension, though, came about from the change of the forces that they come into contact with, which we'll get into. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of what I'll say strained criticism of people really trying hard not to like something that I think really they kind of might have liked if they gave it a chance. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's the internet for you.
I was gonna say I do. The one thing that sticks out to me, being a Melanie Linsky lover, I love and appreciate her, especially on one of my faves, Yellow Jackets. I do remember people being very critical of her being kind of the face and the voice of the revolution, and being like, how is this woman possibly, look at her, hear the sound of her voice, how can she possibly lead a revolution? And it's like, okay, rude and sexist. So we're just gonna ignore you. But yeah, that I do not take as a valid criticism. That I take as people just being sexist and rude.
Yeah.
I do think there is a nugget, a kernel, a nitpick of, do we really need to see this much of Kathleen? Which again, I'm sure we will get into in later episodes as well, as this is kind of a part one of two parts, I would say, with
Yeah.
the next episode, right?
Yeah, I mean, it like sort of it sets up really a full kind of explanation of what the heck is going on here in Kansas City. A lot of this episode leaves a lot of questions unanswered. So I think that having a week of discourse in between really kind of led people to kind of lose their minds a little bit with a lot of the speculation, a lot of the like projection of people's thoughts about how the series was going to go. So yeah, it was it was a messy time to say the least. But
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get into that, and we will, as always, get into spoilers as well. But we'll stick those at the end. We'll flag them up for everyone, so don't you worry about it. But for now, should we just actually dive into the episode itself?
Let's do it.
Okay. This is your fault then. It doesn't matter how much you push the envelope. It'll still be stationary. No pun intended. Volume 2 by Will Livingston. Volume 2. Look, you get it? 2, like TOO.
We open up post Lincoln, post Bill and Frank. All of that trauma is behind us. Everything's okay now, right, Jess? It's all good.
No, my heart's still broken. Every time I see the truck, I don't know if you're the same way, Stuart, but like it's such a reminder of Bill and Frank, that blue and white truck, that
Mhm.
whenever I see it, I'm just like, oh. And I mean, obviously they get a mention this episode with sleeping bags, right? Frank's smells better than Bill's does. So we're still carrying that loss with us for sure. I think especially Joel now having lost Tess and Bill and Frank, like these are
Mhm.
significant losses for him. So I feel like
Yeah.
we're going to be carrying this trauma through the rest of the series.
Yeah, completely. And I think the way in which Joel is obviously at the, I think putting Tommy as the one that, of which he's kind of like focusing on, that's the one he's going ahead for. But you just see this slow kind of like percolation of, well, he's also getting really protective of Ellie, and that is slowly building up.
Mhm.
But yeah, it doesn't like the focus doesn't ever go away from the fact that like he is just a couple of people away from being alone forever, which is, I mean, it's a big fear for like anyone in this whole situation. Like you have to keep going to like keep those near and dear to you alive, and if he keeps failing, I don't know how it's going to really kind of take its toll on him. Really.
Exactly. And he talks about like you keep going for family. Like that
Hmm.
is what keeps you going. And we can tell based on a lot of things that happen this episode that him and Ellie have grown closer. Like you said, they've traveled a good distance at this point together. And
Hmm.
we get a lot of back and forth between them this episode, specifically with the joke book, which is such a fun nugget from the video game. It is a way to add levity into what is assuredly a very grim, dark world. And so having Ellie whip out this joke book and try to read some to Joel, for Joel to basically roll his eyes and be like, that is so stupid, is incredible because it shows Ellie is just a kid after all. And she's a kid with a sense of humor. And so what better way to like lighten up the mood a little bit than to have a little punny joke book with you?
Yeah, and it's just the it's a great vessel to show that Ellie is a proper kid, like is dumb and goofy, and is gonna just try and find anything to occupy like a growing mind that is just looking at everything, going, okay, well, how can I extract some sort of entertainment out of this? Because kids get bored. Like Ellie must be going out of her fucking mind, right? Because there's nothing to do except talk to this old guy called Joel, who's kind of
Yeah.
fascinating, but he's not talking.
No, he's very resistant. You could tell, right? He's keeping her at an arm's length and he's not the most willing to give up information. He's not the most talkative guy in general. So
Mhm.
yeah, what else is she supposed to do with her time besides kind of needle him with these
Yeah.
jokes, like trying to get him to laugh? And I really also love like in the one of the very first scenes of the episode, he's siphoning gas to get them to Wyoming and she asks like, "Oh, how does that work?" And he's like, "Well, there's pressure." And she's like, "You don't know." And I
Mhm.
love that note, Stuart, because Yes, he's an adult. That doesn't mean he knows everything, and you don't have the
Yeah.
internet anymore to just Google an answer to a question that you have. So why would he know exactly how siphoning gas works? It's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, it goes to show that Joel has practical knowledge that is applicable to the situation, but he doesn't know the underlying science behind it, or at least can't explain the science behind it because he doesn't know the terminology or anything. And it's the kind of weird technicality that a kid would absolutely lord over like an adult. Be like, you don't truly know though, and it's like, well, like I got it to work, didn't I, kid? Like,
Mhm.
aren't you happy? I'm providing for you. Shut the f up. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Ellie's just such like a pistol, and it's funny enough, like because we open with her like playing with the gun, which is it's kind of weird to talk about Ellie in a sense of having this like childlike wonder and a sense of kind of trying to extract fun out of everything, while also playing around with a firearm and seemingly being really like it's almost like she feels super powerful holding it. Like she's doing cool guy pose in the mirror and really feeling herself. But it's unnerving because it's this activation of violence in Ellie, which, as we come to find later in the episode, Joel doesn't want to see at all. And Joel feels regretful for. It's it's such a harsh scene to open with because it's like a kid would do this. If a kid had a gun, they absolutely would play with it and pose with it and do whatever.
Yeah, she's looking in a mirror, right? Like she's obviously like, "Oh, look how cool I am. I have a gun. Joel doesn't really know about." I don't remember, Stuart. Did she steal this from Bill's? Like she had to have, right?
Yeah, it's the one that she found in the dresser, and it's the same one that
That's right.
Frank went and got out when trying to protect Bill when he was out in the middle of the road shooting at people.
Right.
So yeah,
Right. So yeah, it's exactly what a child would do and how a kid would handle a gun, which is look in a mirror and pretend they're the most badass thing around.
hmm
And she uh, yeah, it's this whole thing with guns this episode is so fascinating, and we'll get into it later where Joel is actually teaching her how to use the gun, which is a massive step forward from him saying
yeah,
absolutely not, no way, you are not getting a gun back when they first met.
yeah.
And,
She'll just
but
throw a
we have
sandwich at
that,
him.
yeah, and then we have, like, the duality of yes, Ellie has, in this episode, shot a person and now is able to carry a gun, while also has this, like, punny joke book and is trolling Joel by making him try to explain why the pages of a porno magazine are sticky, you know? Like, she's such a little troll, and I absolutely love it. Also, can we talk about the way she eats the Chef Boyardee ravioli? Like,
Yeah.
an absolute animal.
Well, this is the thing, and like the writing supports a really complex character here with Ellie because it shows her in multitudes. It shows her being fascinated by violence. It shows her being a stupid, dumb little kid, and it also shows a history of a kid that has really struggled when it comes to like kind of resources. Like she's resource guarding everything almost. Like the gun is almost like very protective. It's like it's my gun, it's a secret, and I'm gonna hold on to it. Mostly because she also thinks that Joel is gonna obviously take it away from her if he finds it, because she's not allowed it. But like the same with food, it's like I must scarf this down immediately. And I imagine it's probably because of how she's grown up, what with Fedra. And I can't imagine that resources are plentiful, so it's very much like if you don't finish it immediately, I don't know, like kind of maybe other kids are gonna like eat her food or something like that. It's very much like eat it while you got it.
Mhm.
And so it makes total sense. And to get all of these different things in such a short scene of just it's not even focusing on that. That's just a little side nugget to this scene of just character building. It just speaks to the quality of the acting and the writing so well.
Yeah, they're really good at show don't tell, the bond between Joel and Ellie. It's very
Mhm.
obvious that they've grown closer. She's making fun of the coffee, right? She's saying, "Ugh,
Oh,
that stuff stinks," and then he's slurping it so freaking loudly.
yeah.
Um, and the fact that he does open up about Tommy, right? She says, "Well, do you have 25 hours to spare? Like, is it gonna take that long to say the story? Because that's how long we have on the road." And he
Mhm.
does. He does open up about Tommy, who's a quote unquote joiner. He joined the army, he went to Desert Storm, and then that we find out Tommy is the reason that that Joel and Tess even met because they were in the same group heading to Boston. And it's
Yeah.
after Tommy meets Marlene that he joins the Fireflies, because I think if we're looking at Tommy being the optimist in the world, and maybe there's some sort of connection there with Ellie as well, Joel is certainly the pessimist.
Oh yeah.
Tommy wants to believe that we can save the world, and Joel scoffs at that idea. He's never believed in anything the Fireflies have done, right? He's more of the mindset of, what was that quote from the woman who was with Marlene, where it's like, enough, graffiti, all it is. In 20 years, we've managed to put graffiti
Yeah.
up on the walls. I think that's kind of where Joel's mindset is on it. But he does tell Ellie all of this, which is a
Yeah.
huge improvement from basically saying, like, you're a kid, I'm not telling you anything.
Yeah, it's a massive improvement, and I think Ellie really strong armed him into it, because I mean, what answer do you have when a kid is just asking you a really kind of simple question, and you do have 25 hours to kill? Like, you seem silly to say no, I'm not telling you that. It's like you seem childish. So I think that it kind of appeals to maybe a sense of bravado, or maybe just a sense of just maturity, of just being like, oh yeah, it is really dumb to not talk to you about this and to actually like converse with you. I think with the whole Joel and Tommy of it, Joel was never afforded the opportunity to buy into any of the like move to Boston like optimism, the Firefly optimism, because I mean for him, his world ended day one of the outbreak. And so from that point onwards, there's nothing to be hopeful for, because there's no spark for Joel anymore. He's become a bit of a shell of a person, because all his function to this world is to protect people around him, and he's doing that out of obligation. So when he comes to say that, like, you keep going for family, I felt that that was really a bleak sentiment, because it can be taken as being quite positive. You go for family because you love your family. I don't think Joel's doing it for that. I think he's doing it because it's just what you do. And I
Right.
don't think that he's really living. He's just existing, which I think is really
Yeah.
sad.
And we learn that it's the way, he's a protector. He is the protector, right? We talked about this last episode with Bill's letter to him, and how
Mhm.
that's his role. He is a
Yeah.
protector. I do also think there is some kind of logic behind him sharing this information on Tommy. I think it goes hand in hand with them being in a very rural part of the country and not being able to light a fire, not because they're afraid of infected, but because they were afraid of people, right? All
Yeah.
of the reason Joel telling Ellie to fear what other humans will do to her, and also to warn her about Tommy getting ingratiated into these different groups, in my opinion, like, serve a very logical reason of, you need to protect yourself. Like, she needs to at least be somewhat aware of what they might run into,
Mhm.
especially knowing, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but like, there are two incidences this episode where Joel not being able to hear his surroundings put their lives in jeopardy. So, like, having her be clued in at least a little bit as to the dangers of the world beyond just the infected could be life-saving. I think there's a practicality in him explaining all of this to her as well. And maybe he's not even thinking it that far through. Maybe it is as simple as, we got 25 hours to kill and she's asking a really simple question. But I like the way in which they show this bond building between them, where Joel is opening up a little bit more. And there is that playful back and forth with, again, Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey just have like the best chemistry. So it
Mhm.
works so well. Every side eye Ellie gives, it's just like, it's classic. I love it so much. It's great.
Yeah. It's so funny, because I think obviously Bella Ramsey's casting came with a lot of controversy, because there were a lot of people that were really hung up on the fact that she looked different than Game Ellie. I think Pedro looks nothing like Game Joel. Like, I
Yeah.
think they're different enough that I'm like, it's just jarring in the sense of like, I notice a difference when I look at them side by side with both characters. But some people really got hung up on Bella Ramsey's casting, and I don't know how you can quibble with it when you see the chemistry between these two people. Because yes, of course, it'd be nice if they did kind of look like the characters, but then also, why? Why don't you just play the game again? Having other people have a different go at the game, in terms of like throwing it into a different media and having a like different perspective on it is fantastic. But that aside, when you see the chemistry between them, you see why this casting works so bloody well. Because imagine getting two actors that look identical to the game, but they've got no chemistry. It wouldn't work in the slightest. You've got to have the chemistry. It's got to be these weird little moments of them making each other laugh and believing that Ellie has actually done it and like kind of does make Joel cringe and go, that's stupid kind of thing. I felt that. Like I felt like the two of them were just really truly existing out in that world. And it completely immersed me, which is why I kind of love it. So for all the dissenters, I don't agree with it at all.
It's just the very last thing that should be considered when you're casting someone for something. Because,
Mhm.
I mean, not to bring up one of my faves, but I will. Like, look at Hamilton, right? Like,
Mhm.
all those people just would have been white. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, why are we caring about that? That is the last thing you should care about. Can they act? Can they embody the character? And do they have chemistry with one another? Those are the things we should be looking at. And I feel like both of them check all three of those boxes very easily.
Exactly. Judge people on their ability to do the thing, not
Mhm.
for anything else.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's over. We're not fighting anymore. I'm gonna go home. I'll tell everyone you're good. I don't know what to do. My legs don't work. My mom isn't far. If you can get me to her. We can trade with you guys. We can be friends. I didn't know. I'm Brian. What's your name?
So we get away from like obviously their relationship building, and we come to find that they come to a blockade. Or even it's not even a formal blockade, is it? It's just a
Just
bus that's strewn
cars.
over the road. Yeah, it's just the aftermath of everything. As they try to get towards Kansas. Um, Almost foreshadowing that they maybe should have turned back. I felt like this was my only kind of quibble with Joel's reasoning, and I see what they were going at because Joel is kind of eager to get to Wyoming, like to like move ahead and progress this forward. But it's kind of a dumb move, right? Like,
It
why would you
is.
drive towards a city?
I suppose if we're gonna like another reason they maybe set up is with the siphoning of the gas, him saying a lot of it's watery at this point
Yeah.
and it barely gets you anywhere. Obviously
Hmm.
going a long way isn't just as inconvenient as it takes a couple extra hours. It's also utilizing resources that maybe you don't have. So but I totally agree with you. Like going through a city sounds like an obvious faux pas. But they do it. And I love the parallel to episode 1 with Ellie asking, "Are we gonna help that person that looks like they
Oh,
need help?" Exactly as Sarah asks, and Joel's answer is the same, which is absolutely not no.
yeah, and it does not go down well at all. I thought it's quite telling that in that situation they did potentially have the opportunity to reverse, turn left, but Joel went straight forward and went for the guy, and maybe that could have been the ruining of them. I don't know. Maybe there were worse things waiting for them behind them, like other traps or anything like that. But there's something to be said for Joel going for aggression and immediately getting hit by a big old breeze block that goes through the windshield and then having to crash. The crash was brutal, I thought. Like in terms of just it
Yeah.
feeling really visceral of just how it hit really hard. And it wasn't one of these kind of like cut, like action sequences. It was very much like cut, bam. And then we see the car slam into this shop. Thank God he told Ellie to put on a seatbelt.
I had the same exact thought. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, imagine she could have gotten really hurt." And yeah, the him trying to protect her, go hide in the wall over there, like, don't come out. And yeah, like I said before, Joel's hearing not being the greatest,
Hmm.
fails him and he is being strangled. And the only thing that saves him is Ellie. And I like right, we see her like kind of slowly walking on the glass and shooting the guy, and she seemingly like shoots him in the spine, right? Like I think it's
Yeah.
obvious that she's not. I feel like the move most of the time, at least from what I've heard, is like aim for the body. It's the biggest part of a person.
Yeah.
It's the easiest to hit. Like, don't be an idiot and go for the headshot 'cause you're probably gonna miss. So I'm assuming that's what she did. And it's really sad, Stuart, because I also couldn't help but notice the guy that she shoots, he's also kind of just a kid. Like, yes, he's a
Mhm.
little bit older than Ellie, but he's barely an adult, if that. And he's like the way when he's calling out for his mom, like it's
Yeah.
truly horrible, even though he's the bad guy, right?
Well, this is the thing, like, is he the bad guy? Yes, they attacked, but then for what reasoning are they attacking? Like, do they think that Joel is a dissenter from the situation that's going on? Is Joel, I know from Fedra that like they've seen the QZ is wide open, so like maybe there is like something going on there. It could be anything, could be risk with the way in which obviously there was some duplicity with the whole pretending to be hurt and
Right.
luring people in and Joel recognizing it. We know what the situation is, but I mean, ultimately, everyone's doing what they're doing in this world to survive. I don't think much of it is for excess or for gain or for
Right.
power. It's for survival. So there is a measure of just, well, how much do we kind of judge people for doing crappy things? Like, are we going to judge Joel for the same way? Mm,
Especially
maybe.
because this kid is much younger than Joel was when he did all of
Yes.
that, right? Like, the way I look at it is this is a teenager. He's known nothing else but this world. And just like Ellie, and his family taught him these ways, I assume, or whomever he is with taught him to do this. I don't he
Mhm.
didn't really have much of a choice, you have to imagine. And so
Yeah.
it's also pretty tragic when you think of it that way, that not only is Ellie being forced to do violence to another person to save Joel, but that person grew up around violence to get by, to survive in this world. And of course, then you have the aspect of Joel not wanting Ellie to see any of this, right? He tells her to go back and hide again. And we hear this kid just begging and pleading for his life, calling out for his mom. It's really awful, and you have to like,
Mhm.
Ellie cries a little bit later about it, and I have to imagine she's hearing that voice in her head over and over again, him just yelling for his mom. It's really awful, and the guilt that Joel feels having to have Ellie take that gun and take it into her own hands, you can see where his protective nature kind of comes in of like, I wanna shield her from this sort of thing, when it's
Yeah.
really not possible in this world to do that.
No, and we even got the foreshadowing of that because he tries to divert her from the route where they can see the mass grave in episode 3.
Yeah.
And it's like Joel is wanting to protect her, and in this situation failed and is suitably angry. Not only for the fact that they've obviously been jumped, but I think certainly because he feels a sense of failure because his duty is to protect this kid, not only in physicality, but also protect her bloody brain, her soul from not having to kill people to try and stop this endless cycle of violence, and has failed because she's had to do it. The way in which Bella like pulls the trigger, I thought was so well done as well because it was so timid and scared, and it was like kind of squeeze, 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 bang, and it like proper shook them. Um, I thought that was impeccable. But the guys pleading, I can't get over how brutal that was because often this show is referred to as being a really kind of dark show. I think that was one of the darkest moments. Is when they just had someone literally going no 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 no, and then going mum and calling out for his mum in his dying words. Oh, it's so harsh.
It's really heartbreaking, and of course, Joel is the one who finishes the guy off, and it's
Yeah.
he has to do it, and this is Joel. They talk about it later, like, "Oh, does it get easier as you get older?" And he says, "No." But I do think there is a level of it's probably difficult every single time to kill a person, especially a young kid, especially when they're begging for their life and unarmed, right? Like,
Hmm.
all of those things are true. He knows his name, for God's sake. Like, we
Yeah.
find out this guy's name is Brian. Like, we know his name. That's a thing they say if you're ever held at gunpoint, like, reveal personal information about yourself because it makes you a human being to the
Yeah.
person that is aiming a gun at you. Um, and it's just you have to imagine how many people Joel has killed, how many humans not infected, and how many of those people did he know their name? You know, like how many people was he able to say this was their name, this is who they were with, this is their age?
Mhm.
I'm sure it doesn't get easier, but he's more hardened to this world than Ellie is. He's more experienced in it, and he has the justification always of I'm doing this for a reason. And also, yeah, that kid attacked him, so he's only gonna feel so bad.
Yeah. I mean, he also got a good knife out of it, I guess, which
Yeah, nice little
is
dagger.
yeah. I mean, get some stabbies. I did appreciate the fact that they didn't just go into like, oh, we've got guns, hoo-ha, yeah, and start shooting left and right. Like there seemed to be like a real sense of from Joel's side of taking effective, clean shots rather than just indiscriminately spraying and praying, which I thought was
Mhm.
really effective. And then also just the fact that like he finishes the kid off with a knife when the knife is presented because you gotta save ammo. If anyone has played the game, and especially on the harder difficulties, you know you gotta save your ammo. Like you can't just
Yeah.
be going around yee-hawing the place. So yeah, I thought that was a good touch to throw in, but for a scene itself, not unnecessarily brutal, but a brutal choice to kind of have it the way it
Yeah.
goes.
I wonder if this is the cell where my brother was beaten to death.
No, you were wronged. And I'm sorry. But this has gone too far. It has to stop.
It has to stop now, you mean? Now that you're in the cell. But before, people dying was okay. When you were safe and protected and ratting on your neighbors to Fedra.
They put a gun to my head.
Here. Have I satisfied the necessary conditions for you to talk?
So that's like the world that Brian comes from, which is Kansas, which has seemingly gone to shit. Like Fedra's gone.
Yeah, Kansas City has been overthrown. The QZ is overthrown. Fedra is no longer in control. And we get a face to the revolution, which is very much unlike the video game, right? Like we don't know who the head of anything is, really. Like Joel
No.
and Ellie are our main characters. They're who we stay with. And they decided to shift away from that in the adaptation and present us to Kathleen. I want to know, Stuart, because you were very much like, again, like very much into the video game. I played the game alongside watching, so I didn't have that like nostalgia or like bleeding heart for the game. What did you make of Melanie Linsky as Kathleen in this episode?
I thought it was a really interesting choice because, for one thing, in the game, the opposing force that Joel and Ellie face when they go into Pittsburgh in the game, but Kansas City here, is that they're referred to as the Hunters. And they're seemingly people that are hunting people just for their own personal gain. Like they're not looking to gain allies. They're not looking to build anything. They're just looking to get whatever resources they can. They're plunderers. They're pirates, but they're awful. But in this, there's often a criticism of media trying to humanize baddies, and I think that this completely doesn't go in that direction because they do humanize them, but they do it in a really kind of effective way because they do it to embellish the world building. Because in changing it to be that they have overthrown Fedra and they are now in control of the QZ, and to put Kathleen as the head of that, I thought made total sense because now you have someone to focus in on as the person who embodies what that thing is. The problem with the game is that it's a number of really kind of unmemorable baddies that just keep
Yeah.
coming and coming, and you don't really kind of like know why they're after you, except for the fact that they're after you, and that's enough for a video game. But for like a TV show, that doesn't really work because you kind of want to know what's going on. You want to know the story, that you're being told a story. And so I thought this worked incredibly well. Melanie Linsky is, I think, a really inspired choice to pick for this because I think it was something that was a little left field. I think not the typical trope that you would kind of expect. I think most people would expect some militia kind of like hardened
Yeah,
military
like what is
person
it,
that's
Laura Croft or like Tomb Raider, sort of like Terminator, sort of like army woman, right? Like that's what you would
yeah,
picture, not Melanie
yeah.
Linsky, who doesn't look like that, you know?
No, like and it really taps into what this organization is, which is a group of people that have overthrown their oppressors, but are primarily fueled on revenge. Like that is their MO. And this woman epitomizes revenge because she clearly wants it. And if she doesn't get it, she's like everything's gonna burn unless she gets it. So I thought it was a really good choice. As a TV viewer, did you find the kind of like same when you could because you went in you didn't play the game first, did you? You watched the show and then played,
Watched the
or was
show
it the
and
other
then
way
I
around?
played, right.
Yeah.
I love that we expanded on the world in that we had previously, like you said, we had hunters who were hunting you for seemingly no reason, for sport, maybe like for fun. And here I like the twist on it that normally we would be pro-revolutionaries, right? Like we
Mhm.
would be, yes, overthrow Fedra. Like Fedra are a bunch of Nazis. Like absolutely take over them. But you have Kathleen, who is difficult to want to root for because like yes, we understand, oh, her brother died, right? Like she's out for revenge, but the way she goes about it is like so extreme, and we don't like that. So I like that the show expanded on the world in that way. I think coming after episode 3, this episode would struggle no matter what, because episode 3
Mhm.
is so just like beautiful and lovely, and like it is a one episode start to finish story.
Yeah.
And this episode sort of feels like a part 1 of 2 episodes. So I
Mhm.
think that this episode would struggle no matter what. Especially when you have a brand new character who isn't in the games. So it's not like we have any sort of connection to Kathleen as a character. Um, I like what they did. I think that when you just watch this episode as a single episode and you don't immediately jump to episode 5, I think it feels a little not unfinished, but like almost like, okay, we're not seeing the full picture yet. Whereas every other episode, in my opinion, has been kind of self-contained. Especially, obviously, we know episode 1 was supposed to be 2 episodes, so like
Mhm.
those feel like self-contained stories. Now we're spending 2 episodes in Kansas City. I don't think that's a spoiler to say, considering how we leave the episode. We're gonna go back to Kansas City in episode 5, so it feels a little unfinished, but I like it in that we see what could happen in Boston if the Fireflies succeeded, right? If like the revolutionaries took over, we
Yeah.
see the potential for how they can also become very corrupt. So it's a very interesting storyline. Obviously, I love Melanie Linsky. I think she is an inspired choice for this sort of a role. It's fascinating. And let's face it kind of makes sense. Like, she's a total badass. In case you haven't seen Yellow Jackets, like, make no doubt about it. Melanie Linsky is a badass. But on
Mhm.
top of that, it's like, yeah, someone like this, it's as simple as her brother was in charge and he's no longer there. She heads up the revolution now. Like, she's like second in command. So I just I just love it. I think it shows that, yeah, you make mistakes when maybe revenge is your primary motivation.
Yeah.
And especially with that, what's going on in that storage room, baby? Like the
Mhm.
rumblings down under, and her saying, nah, just shut the door. We'll deal with that later.
Yeah. It'll be fine, right?
Of course.
Sure.
Definitely could not go wrong.
Yeah, I think the Melody Linsky of it all again similar to the misogyny that came about from Bella Ramsey's casting of just like the judgment that is thrown on female and female presenting characters. Oh, sorry, actors is that they are under so much more scrutiny than anyone else, and I think a lot of the criticism, at least that was tabled online, as you'd expect, for Melanie Linsky, was that oh, why would I believe that a woman is in charge like this? She doesn't speak with authority. She's such an unbelievable leader. I'm sorry, but like, if she is the sister of the guy that was in charge and her MO is revenge, and you've got bloodlust from recently overtaking your own QZ, I'm sorry, how does that not logically follow that she would be a suitable leader for that moment? That's not to say that she's a good leader. I don't think anything in this episode sets up her being a good leader in any sense of it being long term. She makes such rash emotional decisions, and she is set up to be shown as a poor leader of people that is only going to be good for one short term objective. And even then, I don't know how effective she'll be at that, because we'll get that in the second episode. But
Yeah.
it's kind of just wild how some people project so much of their kind of like external biases onto this, of just, oh, okay, I kind of don't, I think the leader should have been like some tough guy that could have like, united everyone. It's like, come on, think of things complexly. Like, imagine, take what they're setting up, imagine that being applied, and go with it, buy into the story. I don't see people that, I don't understand why people approach things with a wanton belief of disliking it, because it doesn't quite match up with your expectations of what has come before. Here's the thing: stories can be new things. They can present new ideas.
Mhm.
We don't have to keep retreading the same old crap every time. It can be like, new and interesting. So I really adored the choice, and I loved the fact that it wasn't just a stunt, virtuous bit of casting for the sake of it. Everything about it made sense. And I kind of have to give them props for taking that choice, because they knew they would do it, and they knew that they would get this reaction. There's no way in which you don't cast someone that is totally kind of atypical to the expectations and not expect that kind of like online vitriolic reaction. And I kind of admire a team that would put this together and say, well, F it. We want to tell a good story, and we're going to tell a good story whether they like it or not, because we know that there are people out there that will appreciate it. And I think
Yeah.
people that really gave it a chance have appreciated it. There's the reason why I think the ratings for this plummeted initially, but in time have kind of slowly crept up, because I think people are actually, giving it a chance.
Yeah, and I think the major thing to also note is, like we said earlier, like, she's not even necessarily shown to be the best leader there is. She makes mistakes. Do we not think it's a mistake for her to immediately just kill a doctor? A doctor in this
Mhm,
world? Like, right? Like, that just seems like so short-sighted. But she does
mhm,
it because she's vengeful. And people who act on those, like, from an emotional place, usually they are kind of short-sighted, and that's where she's coming from. She is coming from this rage-fueled hatred towards all these people who were responsible for the death of her brother, and that's a very strong place to come from, and she was able to get people on her side because those people also cared about her brother. So it's really easy, in fact, to see how she became the leader. It's just, is she, yes, maybe she's an effective leader, but like a successful one, time will
mhm.
tell.
Yes.
It's very obvious that she is so like blinded by rage and has blinders on to anything else happening around her. When she sees the Brian, who we talked about earlier, dead, she's, oh, it's them. It's them. We need to get them. She immediately blames it on who she wants to be responsible for
Yeah.
it, to then rile everyone up, get everyone ready to go hunt down Henry. She keeps talking about Henry, and they do eventually find Henry's hideout. She says, well, good news is he's out of food, so he should be easy enough to find. And once that is settled, once we hunt down Henry and punish him, then we will deal with what's going on in the storage room, which, again, very short-sighted. She's not necessarily the most logical, well-reasoned leader, but people in this world hardly ever are. And also in our world, like, how you're telling me that if someone killed a very close family member to you, you wouldn't be filled with rage and want to seek
No.
vengeance? Like, of course that's how she's going to act. So, yeah, Kathleen is an interesting character. I think people had their judgments about Melanie Linsky playing this character, but truly, like, she's so badass that, like, she's like Meryl Streep. Like, Meryl Streep is always the right choice. Melanie Linsky is always the right choice. She could be freaking Batman, and I'd be like, yes, sign me up. She is the knight. You know, like, truly, it's ridiculous.
She's nice.
She
Funny
is.
enough, talking of superheroes, to make a really convoluted segue here.
Yes.
When she finds the drawings in that kind of thing, and then like sees these kind of like wonderful like child's crayon drawings of a superhero, and then goes, "Oh, they're out of food." I was like, "Oh, this bitch! Like, she's horrible. Like, she's gonna absolutely go for a kid." And I was like, sealed it for me. I was like, she's awful at this point.
Yeah.
So that was good to get that confirmation in this episode rather than drawing that out and going, "Oh, is she good? Is she bad?
Oh,
Like,
no, she's
are we meant to
horrible,
root for her?" Yeah, it's so terrible. Oh, Kathleen is, yeah, interesting is the best, I think, descriptor of her. Absolutely. Like, she is, yeah, it's such an interesting character, an interesting choice. I can't get away with it.
Thing is I didn't hear that guy coming. And he shouldn't have had to, you know.
Well, you're glad I did, right?
You're just a kid. You should know what it means to. It's not like you killed him, but shooting or. I know what it's like. First time that you hurt someone like that. If you, well, I'm not good at this.
Yeah, you really aren't.
I mean, it was my fault. You shouldn't have had to. And I'm sorry.
So then we end up navigating through Kansas City. So Ellie and Joel are hiding out, and Ellie is spotted a really tall building. Oh no, she kind of refers to the tall building Joel is spotted that they want to head towards because obviously great vantage point. Clever idea.
Yep. And I mean, I think also maybe you're a little bit more stuck if they do find you, but what are the chances that they're willing to climb 33 floors to find
Yeah.
you, right? Like, he's smart enough to realize they're going through apartment buildings first. We'll wait until they're done, then we'll leave and find our way to this tall building. And while they're kind of waiting and hiding out, they have this conversation where Joel, apologizes. He feels very guilty. She shouldn't have had to shoot him. That was his fault. He didn't hear him coming. And Ellie responds that that's not the first time that she's done that, which is fascinating, especially to Joel. I feel like this is a shock to Joel, knowing that she grew up in like a federal school. Like, why would she have killed someone before, or why would she have shot someone before? And he doesn't press her then, but he does later. And it is so interesting that we have a reversal of roles here where Ellie, for the first time, is just unwilling to talk about something that Joel is pressing her for information on. I really enjoyed that this little role reversal they had.
Yeah, it's so tough because when Ellie like admits that it's not the first time, it's like, whoa, like kind of that's it's the fact that she like tells me, and the fact that like Joel is kind of horrified in reaction, as quite rightly should be. Like, doesn't overplay it, but there's this kind of subtle of just like, oh, okay, right, okay, we've got to deal with this now. It lends itself to say like Ellie is not just this little kid that needs to be protected. Ellie's seen some shit, and there's a lot like beneath the surface that you don't necessarily know, and it's a good thing. It's a great thing of just saying, well, don't judge people by everything that you expect. Like, the people are complex and they have some histories that you may not know about. Kind of great as well, because I think it also shows Joel that a lot of the times when he is very kind of grumpy about the world because of the things that he's seen and done, and you realize that this kid has now killed 2 people, and she's a kid, like things could be worse, Joel. So I think that
Yeah.
really lends itself to telling him to kind of lighten up a little bit and to, yeah, okay, things are tough for you, but you're the adult here. You're not a kid that's killed 2 people, mate.
Hmm.
Calm down.
Yeah, and I think it's the right move at this point for him to teach her how to properly use a gun
Yeah.
because if I think he does kind of realize, especially where they're at currently, where they're hunkered down, hoping they don't get found by these people that are killing others and ambushing them. It's probably a smart idea to let her know how to use a gun properly because nothing's worse than her using it improperly and like unsafely
Mhm.
and either shooting herself
Yeah.
or him. So better to just teach her how to shoot. I love he's like, "How did you learn how to do that?" She's like, "Federal school." He's like, "Yeah, of course." He's like
Yeah,
teaching
really
her.
judging their teaching.
Mhm. He's teaching her how to shoot the gun and telling her, "No, keep it in your bag. That way you don't shoot your ass off." And of course,
Mhm.
she's sneakily, puts it in her jacket instead, which
Yeah.
I guess is like a fair compromise. Um,
Such a sweet moment as he is teaching her like how to do the gun play. It's like thumb over the thumb, and then to illustrate it, tugs at it, and then like Bella just chuckles, and it's
so
like with
good.
a proper like 'cause it's silly what he's doing. He was playing around and like testing her, and like she did hold on to it, and she did like kind of really kind of grip it tight the way he. So it was almost like one of those little childish chuckles of just like I'm proud of what I'm doing, and also this is silly. Like which again just lends itself to
Yeah.
like Ellie being a kid, which
Yeah.
is so good to reinforce. Like this is a kid we're dealing with here. Like it's serious. It's not. She's not an adult. Like she shouldn't be having to deal with this crap. So
Yeah.
any opportunity where they can reinforce that, I just love it so much.
Especially because 'cause they're so good at bouncing back and forth between these, like, very serious, informational moments, right? When she asks, how he knew that it was an ambush, and he says he used to
Hmm.
be that sort of a person, so he
Yes.
recognized the con, and, like, if he's killed innocent people and him just not answering, which is an answer enough, right? Like,
Yeah.
bouncing between a moment like that and then them reaching the 33rd floor and her calling him a lazy ass because he's like tired because he's in his 50s and climbing 33 stories. Like the way they bounce back and forth is so great because if the show didn't have those jokier moments, it would feel so bleak. Like it would feel too
Mhm.
heavy. It would be like wading through molasses. Like we need those moments of levity to be able to laugh and join in on their laughter. And it also like endears us a little bit more, I think, to Joel. Joel is like very hardened character who has been through a lot and done stuff, right? Like we
Yeah.
know he's not like the best guy ever. He's not a saint. He's done bad things to get by. Anyone who's alive at this point probably has. And so to endear us to him, we get this back and forth between him and Ellie. And it's just great. Like they get up there and he's setting out the glass, and yet again she's yelling his name. He can't hear her. And I believe is it also this episode where he says like, "Oh, it's probably more from me shooting a gun than like being shot at is like the hearing loss," which is interesting.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, he sets up the glass so that if someone steps on it, he'll be able to hear it. Which unfortunately he rolls over and his good hearing ear is blocked.
Yeah, great idea if it had worked. It's the kind of thing that I imagine that Joel's done once before and has paid off and has been worthwhile doing. And so, of course, he does it out of habit. And like, I mean, he kind of does it without even explaining it to Ellie, which is why she's questioning it. And so it's just Oh, it's such a shame that it didn't work out for them because I mean that would have been really clever. Like you hear a crunch and then all of a sudden you're like, game on, like we gotta get up. Make total sense. The fact that he rolled over though, because he had to turn away from finding the joke so funny and like oh, it was so sweet. Like that moment when they kind of the joke is told and he kind of rolls over and you can just see like him laughing and then she laughs with them and it's there are a few I'm an easy person to trigger when it comes to crying. This gets me most times because I think it is so endearingly sweet between the two of them and it's
Yeah.
because playing the game it takes you play the game. Like the game is, oh gosh, I can't even remember how many hours, but it's many hours, much more than a TV show. And so you don't really get that building of a relationship until very kind of late into the game. And to get it coming as organically a little bit earlier than what I expected it to come paid off in dividends because it took me by surprise when I first watched it, but also I want them to be buddies. I want them to get on and tell jokes
Yeah.
and stuff. I'm not expecting them to be best buddies immediately. I think that would be too high expectation and it would be a betrayal of kind of who they are. But already, like, they're cracking wise jokes at each other. Like, it's their personalities.
Yeah.
They are the kind of people that to show love through dragging each other. So it makes sense they would do this.
It's also there's something very sweet that almost makes you want to cry at the character of Joel, who is so tough and rarely cracks a smile, laughs, right? Like, it's so rare that he does those things that when something as silly as a diarrhea joke makes him giggle, it's that much better. And I don't know if this is true at all. It's just my own personal headcanon. I feel like that's a moment where, like, Pedro Pascal is kind of breaking. Like, he's, like,
Mhm.
almost that's his laugh more than anything, you know what I mean? And so there's something just so supremely sweet about him trying to hide the fact that he's laughing from Ellie and her being like, "Yeah, you laughed. I know you did." Like, it's exactly what you would expect of, like, a parent-child relationship, that kind of,
Yeah.
like, poking at each other for people who are familiar with one another, right? Like, you only pick on someone that way if you really care about them. And
Mhm.
it's just, you have to imagine, like, okay, now that they've been traveling for however long, like, Ellie's just, like, annoying the crap out of Joel with these jokes. And he even gets one right? He gets, like, the scarecrow one right. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just, it's so endearing, and his little giggle. And Stuart, I know you haven't seen Parks and Rec, but, like, Ron Swanson, Nick Offerman, famously has this, like, very endearing giggle. And
Mhm.
he is such a, like, hard, mustachioed, like, masculine man that when he has this, like, little squeal of a giggle, it just makes me laugh every time because it is so sweet. And that's exactly how I feel with Joel. Like, Pedro
Yeah.
Pascal seems like he laughs very often and very loudly and all of that. Joel does not. And so to get that in this character and to have it be because of something Ellie says and does is, like, just that much sweeter. I love it so, so, so much. And they're like,
Yeah.
yes, maybe they are sleeping like 5 feet apart, but they're getting closer. Like, the
Yeah.
bonding wise, maybe not in physical proximity, but bonding wise, they are.
Yeah, and that's a really great TV writing choice is because like the game, you spend hours and hours and hours and you get this slow building of the relationship that is in the game feels much more of a protective and very kind of I'm just gonna say protective, like a protective relationship that kind of is manifested, and it's shown in not the flashback, the opening scene with Sarah. In that Sarah cracks a joke about drugs, and Joel just goes, "Oh, you can pay the mortgage then." And I think that's the fullest extent that we get of Joel cracking a joke in the opening. But in the TV show, we get oh, I'm on Atkins. She'll be around to like make biscuits with you. Like there's that back
Mhm.
and forth between the two that they established between Joel and Sarah of just ribbing each other as a way of showing love, of saying that like, oh, uh, Tommy, he's dependent on me. It's different. Like they're always kind of like taking the piss out of each other to show a bit of love, and to see that difference from the game and TV show be mirrored in the relationship with how Ellie is also kind of making Joel laugh and Joel is cracking jokes back is
Mhm.
just this is why you adapt stuff. You have a different perspective on it, and both are equally valid, equally brilliant. But like, have a bit of variance. Otherwise, why don't we just play the game?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I also do think that, like, it's hard not to see Joel and Ellie also as, like, Pedro and Bella like bonding,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like you feel that bond coming through, and you could just tell they're having a good time, you know?
Yeah.
Like it seems like they're having a great time. So
Like
yeah,
I
go ahead.
I know that actors, when it comes to promo for shows, they're paid to do marketing. Like they're paid to do all of these interviews and stuff. I I refuse to believe that they're that good at actors that they don't come across as best friends because if it turns out they hate each other and they don't like each other, I mean, give them
Devastated.
the Oscars because everything that they've ever done in the promotion for this show shows them as being the most charming and lovable people, and they seem to adore each other.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be convinced otherwise because
No.
they come across because they share a bond. Like they are legitimately good friends, and it comes through so well with their chemistry.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it. And unfortunately though, it is because Joel turns away, his good ear is
Yeah.
covered, and two people are able to sneak up on Ellie and Joel. And that's the end of the episode. And this little kid with the orange face paint is
Hmm.
holding Joel at gunpoint.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Which again, like he's talking about protecting Ellie from the brutality and how she shouldn't have to deal with that, and he wakes up to a kid holding a gun to his face.
Even younger
Oh,
than Ellie. Like,
yeah.
yikes.
Hmm.
Which I know,
Yeah.
we'll actually we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. I don't want to spoil anybody who hasn't seen it yet. So
Yes. We'll be very good on that. So, as an episode on its own, then, Jess, what were your thoughts on it as a whole?
I think I think it's the weakest episode so far, but by weakest I don't mean it's a bad episode. It's still
Oh,
a
yeah.
really good episode of TV. It's just I think the tonal shift from episode 3 to 4 is felt really strongly. Like it feels that episode is so self-contained that when you get to an episode that feels like a part 1, I think it feels almost incomplete in a way. But
Hmm.
that being said, I think the progression that we make in the Ellie and Joel bonding is excellent. You can feel it. You can feel that time has passed and that they've grown closer and he's revealing more about his background. Um I really do like this episode. I think that it's going to lead us into episode 5 and I think I don't mind a little bit of a cliffhanger here. I think it makes a lot of sense. There was no way they could tell this story in one episode without it feeling overstuffed and just too much, unless they wanted to make it like an hour and a half like they did for the first episode. So
Hmm.
I like it. I just think I think it's tough to follow up on for a long time, you know?
Yeah, it is really difficult to follow up on that episode specifically because it was so intense and
Mm,
was just an absolute mammoth episode. I mean, there's a reason why it was nominated for so many awards. It's a reason why it's been a talking point for so much. Um, I mean, not a spoiler for the next episode, but like next episode is an hour long. So that if they were combined, it'd be an hour and 45, which
yeah.
for timing wise, I mean, maybe you could certainly make some edits to cut it down. I feel like there were points in this episode that were maybe a little longer and we'd given time to breathe, which I'm appreciative of. But I think if there was more ruthless production or editing, they could have cut it down by an episode.
Mhm.
But I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad that they kind of let us just exist in this world for a bit. I think it was necessary because we've gone from the episode opener, which is just like welcome, episode 2, which is embedding into kind of the Boston or the exterior of Boston of everything. And then we cut it away to Bill and Frank. And so we haven't really had a real time to see what the world is like. And especially our first exposure to a QZ area other than Boston, I think it was necessary to kind of show how there is variance, how there is a difference, and how you do go about traveling. I think in rewatching this, I was surprised at the length of the opening section. The bit with just
Mhm.
Joel and Ellie on the road was like a good 20 minutes, which was nearly like half the episode.
Mhm.
And I'm thankful for it because We saw Joel doing practical things. We got some world building, what with, like the fuel being explained. It's often a huge criticism of any post-apocalyptic stuff that has any sort of vehicles. It's like, well, where are they getting the petrol from? Petrol degrades over time. And it's like, well, it doesn't degrade to a point where you can't use it. And so, I really kind of like it. It's a shame that it is an obvious two-parter. I think that's the thing that lets it down the most, is that had this had a little bit more substance, maybe it wouldn't be as judged as harshly as it is. But I think it's absolutely necessary to make the next episode hit as hard as it does, and the next episode hits really hard. It's a good episode.
Yeah. I think that knowing that the next episode was coming, I was like, okay, this is the requisite episode. We got to get through to. Not that it's a bad one, not that I'm like, it's a slog by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just really excited for what's to come. And one thing I do just want to make note of, can we just appreciate the fact that the two leaders of the two like rebellions and these massive kind of groups that are fighting against the Fedra and the Nazis of it all are two badass women. Like, can we just like appreciate that the show has done that we have Kathleen and Marlene as like our two figureheads? That's incredible. And obviously then you have Ellie, who is a badass within her own right. Of course, we lost Tess, another person who, like, without her, this journey is not happening. Like, the amount of like incredible, just badass women on this show, it's just like invigorating, it's just like very, very exciting. And yeah, I'm excited for what's to come next episode, knowing that we're still hanging out in Kansas City. We're not done there yet. And we leave on like quite the little cliffhanger here. I can't wait to talk about next episode.
Yeah. Next episode's got a lot of things to answer. A bit of a rumble, which we got to address. What the hell actually happened? And who the heck is this kid holding a gun to Joel's head?
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. I think now's about the time that we jump into spoilers. So, of course, if you're not caught up, now's your time to bail. This is your last warning. If you are sticking around, though, hold on 2 seconds. I've got to do some plugs. If you are listening for the first time, you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. It really does help us out, as well as leaving reviews. 5-star reviews are wonderful. We appreciate them so, so much. If you'd like to see our lovely faces, we are on YouTube at youtube.com/@lookforthelightpod. We are also available on all the socials. Look for the Light Pod there, and you can send in some feedback if you so wish at lookforthelightpodcast@gmail.com. But plugs out of the way. This is your last warning. Spoilers are coming up. Henry and Sam are just... when I know this is coming up, I know that I'm about to be punched in the gut so hard, repetitively, because I know what's coming. And the way in which this TV show actually really kind of like twists that knife as well, by showing Sam's drawings, showing the hope and the wonder that's going on there. Oh, it's brutal.
It makes it so much worse. Yeah, I love Henry and Sam. I love their entire storyline. I love how it parallels with Joel and Ellie's storyline, which obviously we'll talk more in depth about next episode. But just even seeing him show up with the face paint of like the superhero mask is heartbreaking, knowing what's coming and knowing just how quickly Ellie is going to bond to this kid. It's like last episode we got our hearts broken into a million pieces, and then this one was like a little bit of a reprieve, and then next episode it's gonna stomp on him even more. I love it.
Yeah. There's so much that is set up in this episode as well, like the hearing, and for what that sets up later in the season with Joel's revelation that came about in the TV show only.
Yes.
So good, because you're there just going, I know what that's for. I know why he's lost his hearing in one ear, because it is from a gunshot, one that was pretty fucking close to his head, right?
Yeah. And the fact that it was a little nugget because like game players didn't know that was a thing either. So you
No.
only get this on a rewatch of the show with after having seen the entire thing. We know exactly what happened to that one, and it you have to just imagine the guilt and like the shame that Joel feels about that if I hadn't made that decision to try to end my own life. And that resulted in me losing hearing, and that resulted in two of these really awful things happening. Like, you have to imagine all of that is what's happening in his brain, that he is then punishing himself as a
Yep.
result. And I mean, also, we can't talk about like hearing loss without talking about the fact that like we're gonna have this character in Sam who they made deaf for the show, which
Mhm.
I cannot wait to talk about next episode, because truly, when I remember watching this episode and then when I played the game and Sam wasn't deaf, I was like, what's up with this? Like, I
Yeah.
loved the version of that they did on the show. Like, it was incredible. Like, what an incredible choice. What a we'll talk about it next episode. But it's just like, again, what is that called? Blind casting? Is that when they just cast like anybody for any role? Like
Any race,
that?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
traditionally like a theatre
Oh,
term.
so it's a
Yeah.
racing. Yeah. But like the idea that you wanted to show representation of someone who is hard of hearing in this sort of a world, and how like dangerous and scary that must be for that little kid. Like, it is incredible the way they do it, the way he adapts to the world with I don't know what those things are even called, with the page that you can rewrite on over and over again.
Yeah. Before next week, I will Google that and
Yeah,
find
we'll
out what
look it
that's
up.
called. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited for the introduction of Henry and Sam. They are like the perfect. I mean, we're talking about Bill and Frank as being like incredible one episode characters. Henry and Sam give them a run for their money in the next episode. So, I can't wait.
Yeah. It's so good. And I love the fact that you mentioned about like Joel and his hearing and it letting down the situation and feeling that kind of like sense of failure. Because of course that's just foreshadowing his panic attack that he starts experiencing in episode 6. Yeah, when they get to Jackson, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is when like, so the foreshadowing for that, I mean, it just speaks to the effective writing of just being like, they know what's coming up, they know they've got to like get that in, and for it all to start making sense. And I think that it's not the kind of foreshadowing that's really kind of slapping you around the face, because I don't think that sense of loss is anything that is foreshadowed in the writing too explicitly. Because if I remember rightly, and I'm sure we'll come on to this when it comes to that episode, but if I remember rightly, it was Pedro Pascal that came up with that and like improv the whole I constantly losing, which is mind blowing to me, because it speaks just the quality of the acting here, because the actor is listening to the lines they're saying and is
Yeah.
reading between the lines of what they're saying and really feeling it.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the point as well. Like when I was watching for the first time, we got into episode 4, and I remember there being this kind of real conflicted feeling, because I came out of the episode a bit underwhelmed, because I knew it was a two-parter. I knew that there was
Yeah.
unresolved stuff here, but it gave me the maybe it was because I was so needing this whole show to be what I had built it up to be, because I had such high expectations. And so I came away from it and I kind of really ruminated on this episode. I remember so clearly watching episode 5 while I was away on a holiday, and I had the free time to really kind of give it thought and to build up, okay, well, what are they going to do next episode, and give like the theme some thoughts. And just remember looking back and just going, no, they're really kind of nailing the vibe, and it is meant to be slow. It is meant to be brutal, and I am meant to kind of feel this sense of like lingering expectation for the next one. I think we're on to a good roll here. And I was just rewarded, because it just gets better and better and better.
Yeah, because this show isn't right. It's not a mystery box show, for the most part, right? That's not what the goal is. And so when you have things like what's going on with the rumbling underground, and who is this little kid holding Joel at gunpoint, like the fact that there are things that are unresolved from one episode going to the next sometimes leaves you feeling unsatisfied. I think on a rewatch, I really didn't feel that anywhere near as much. And especially because, like you said, we spent like 20 minutes with just Joel and Ellie just hanging
Yeah.
out, traveling together. that is a lot of time, and it's really valuable to show you the bond that they're building. So it didn't feel like wasted time as much as like this episode feels more like it's setting things up for what's coming next episode. It also is pretty necessary to set up those things.
Yeah.
So we have the benefit of being able to just jump right into the next episode if we please, right? We don't have to wait another week. But yeah, they set up a lot of fun stuff, and I kind of like the wait from week to week to find out what the hell is going on underground. Like, why is the ground literally moving? It's an incredible little like a note, and I'm trying to remember because I guess we'll talk about this more in next episode. I'm trying to remember exactly in the video game how they do everything with like, oh, they put all the infected people underground, and now finally they're popping out. Like the same. It's not.
strange.
They don't really do that. It's they just
No,
run.
they're just a persistent threat that is around, but you're going through a more human area. So humans are more the risk than clickers are at that point.
Yeah.
They do turn up, but yeah, not from the underground kind
But I
of
like
reasoning.
this. And we'll talk about it next episode, but like I feel like it makes sense. Like humans would do something
Mhm.
like this. They would be like, no, all you infected, go underground. We'll worry about that later. Like that's
Yeah.
certainly a thing someplace would do. So I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense that someone would think, oh, logically this would work. But I'm really excited about next episode because we get to talk about a bloater too. Like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I can't wait. We get to see him do the thing from the video game where he just rips her face in half.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, that
can't wait.
animation I experienced far too many times on certain difficulties.
You didn't have the
I
fire.
don't
You
wanna
didn't
admit
use
it
your
that much.
fire gun properly, Stuart. You got to use the fire gun.
No, I didn't.
They hate fire guns.
Oh,
Yeah.
dickheads! I hate them so much. I hate bloaters so much.
I remember the first time I ran into one thing, I was like, "What is this?"
Mhm.
Ah! Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, there's a few moments you get those in the games, and when they come along, you're just like, oh, they get bigger and they get worse. Wonderful.
yeah.
I think that's it then for this episode. I'm so looking forward to the next. I think it should be an absolute belter. But before we wrap up, Jess, do you want to channel some Will Livingston?
I would love to.
Why did the Resistance fighters open a bakery?
Something with rolls, something with buns. I don't know why.
Because they really know how to rise up. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye bye.